So let's now move on to the next question. This is again, I'll address it to Sharad first. So outlier is always considered as a troublemaker. All right. So I want to know, why is an outlier a troublemaker? Point number one. And I would also want to know how you've addressed the outliers, if they were in your database for the project that you worked on, and why did you use that particular method of treatment? So it's a three-part question. I'll just repeat. Why do you feel outlier is a troublemaker? What did you do when you had outliers in your database? And why did you do what you did with those outliers? Sharad, please.
Okay, thank you, Nitin. I'll try and cover all the three questions in the same answer. Try to elaborate my answer. I was working on dealing with the sales of the second-hand cars. Then we try to look into the data set. Always we try and look at the data set from a multiple variable perspective. That's basically a data frame in our business case. But when we are analyzing the data, we always have to start from one single column. This basically is a univariate analysis approach that we take. And when we talked about analyzing each and every characteristic for, let's say, the car that I'm talking about, that's the data set that I worked on. For example, mileage is one of the columns. The distribution is something that we look at. When I say distribution, we are basically talking about what are the various values of the mileage that I had with respect to my business scenario. The data set that I had is basically projecting that business case. So if, let's say, for example, my cars, but the data set, right, is projecting the examples of cars which have mileage somewhere around 8 kilometers per liter fuel, till, let's say, 25 kilometers per liter. So this is my range. My data should be spreading in this. But if I have an exceptional case, for example, I'm dealing with a specific special car, for example, right? Let's assume that it is one of its kind, maybe Formula One vehicle. So the fuel efficiency of this vehicle could be completely different, right? Now, this is not something which is regularly seen in the business case. It's an abnormal case. This is going to impact the entire analysis that I'm going to do with respect to my data. So this is one of the reasons why I need to remove these exceptions, because they do not repeat regularly, and these are going to impact the entire analysis that I'm going to do for my business problem. So when we talk about the efficiency of the vehicle, so that we can correlate it to the cost, I need to ensure that it is in more of a generic scenario. Hence, we'll have to remove the or treat the exceptional cases. Now, how did I treat? We have many techniques, particularly in this example. I was dealing majority of the cases with respect to the mileage or fuel efficiency is basically my target variable, which is continuous in nature. And I was using an automation technique called winsorization to deal with this outlier treatment. And in winsorization, we have multiple, again, approaches. I specifically use the standard approach, which is used, which is called as IQR technique with 1.5 times as the fold. Before you ask, let me also add up. We do have other techniques. We can go with percentile technique, or we can go with Gaussian technique, which again deals with the normal distribution and all those points. But majority of the scenarios, the general practices with IQR methodology, and that's what I used. There are other techniques where we can also look into the influential observations, which is basically an example of talking about an exceptional case with respect to all the variables taken together. This is also an outlier for a multivariate data. For example, I'm talking about regularly used the cars, which are generally used by common public. But if I bring in a Formula One vehicle, that becomes a specialized car, especially with vehicle altogether. This vehicle details will be always exceptional considering all the factors. So this becomes an exceptional case. We basically call this as influential observation. Now we can also treat this using many techniques. One of the technique that I used is LOF technique, which is called as linear outlier factor. It also used for automatically to detect the outliers with respect to the entire data set. So these are the multiple things that I have worked on in treating the outliers.
Thank you so much, Sharad. Bharani, what about your tryst with the outliers? How was your experience, and
Yeah,
what you have
absolutely.
created?
Yeah, sure. So within the project that I've worked upon, we figured out that outliers can be determined only for numeric columns. And there were two specific columns. One was age, another was income within the loan default prediction model. Within age, we had outliers on the extreme side, upper extreme. So we had a lot of senior citizens for that case. When we went back to our business to determine, hey, why is it that a lot of senior citizens are applying for the loan or have applied for the loan in the past, then they were saying that for senior citizens, we have a special interest rate when we disburse loan. And that worked out very well for us. A lot of senior citizens were applying for the loan. So when we checked with them, would this strategy of marketing continue into the future? They told yes. And we had to retain the outliers in our analysis. We also had another column called as income. When it came to income, we have once again seen outliers on both the sides. On the lower extreme and the upper extreme, we had a few outliers. But out of 5 million records, approximately 10,000 were outliers. Probably 4,000 were at the lower end and 6,000 at the upper end, right? So then we could not possibly spend time investigating each and every outlier. So we have resorted to a technique called as winsorization. And we have given a value called as alpha equal to 5%. What that means is, out of your complete data set, it will choose a 5th percentile value. Any value less than that would be converted to the 5th percentile value. Whatever be the value, you're going to replace it with the 5th percentile value on the lower extreme. And on the upper extreme, it would choose 95th percentile because you have chosen the alpha value as 5%. So any value which is greater than 95th percentile would be replaced with this 95th percentile value because we could not possibly get into each and every outlier and analyze why it was an outlier. So this is how we dealt with the outliers when it came to my project that I've dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you both of you. Well, so I'm quite excited about outliers because outliers are, as they say, troublemakers, but outliers are there because of some reason. They are not a mistake. So my question is a follow-up question with reference to outliers. So what other techniques do you prefer, irrespective of the project that you worked on? And why is a particular technique your favorite? Now, I expect you to answer other than winsorization because you've already chosen both of you. So anything else? I mean, why would you choose that or your next best technique, and why?
All right. So there are many other techniques like we discussed, but if you ask me, my personal choice would be a manual way to handle this. Though it is laborious job, time-consuming job, but that gives me more control over dealing with these outliers. And I would probably look at 1.5 times the IQR technique. Again, it's my personal choice, a personal favorite. So I always go with this. But we can also try with other techniques like we have discussed. Why I use this is because the box plot technique that is used in Python is always by default using the same technique, and visualizing the data will become very easy. That's point number one. But from the information perspective, whenever we talk about outliers, these are generally the exceptional cases, as we discussed, abnormal cases. Now, if I take a more range as acceptable region, then I probably would not analyze some of the data which could be a potential outliers. So we can also talk about Q plus or minus 3 into IQR technique, but that 3 into IQR is going to give me a range which is increasing for accepting the regular values, right? Or treating the values as regular. If I use this technique, I might lose a lot of exceptional cases to be handled. So personal choice, manual technique, and I would always go with the 1.5 into IQR technique.